So you're staring at that blank NEBOSH IG2 form, and it probably feels like you're about to climb a mountain, right? But what if I told you it's actually just a series of small, simple steps? In this explainer, we're going to break it all down and give you the map to get to the top with confidence.
Yeah, looking at this assessment for the first time, it can feel a little overwhelming. You got all this great knowledge from your course, but the big question is, how do you actually apply it correctly? Don't you worry, this guide is designed to give you total clarity and hopefully a lot of confidence. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to get inside the mind of the examiner to see what NEBOSH really wants from you. Then we'll walk through the form step by step, setting the scene, tackling the core risk assessment, and then justifying your actions. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with my top keys to success. Sound good?
Okay, let's dive right in. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of filling out the form, it's so important to understand the big picture. What is the actual purpose of this practical assessment? What's it all about?
Well, here's the thing. This is not about memorizing facts and figures from a book. It's about proving you can walk into a real workplace, spot the dangers, and suggest sensible, practical ways to control them. This is the core skill of a safety professional, and that's exactly what this assessment is designed to test: your ability to apply what you know to the real world.
Right, let's get into the form itself. Part 1 is all about setting the scene. You really need to paint a clear picture for the examiner, who's never seen your workplace before. They should be able to imagine it just from your description.
In this first box, you're going to describe the workplace. Now, you don't need to write a novel. NEBOSH suggests around 150 to 200 words is plenty. Just cover the key points: what the company does, how many people work there, what the area you're assessing is like. This context is absolutely vital for the examiner to understand and judge your risk assessment later on. Next up is your methodology. Now, that sounds a bit technical, doesn't it? But really, it's just you explaining how you did the assessment. Did you walk around and just watch people work? Did you have a chat with some of the workers or managers? Did you look at any paperwork, like accident records or equipment manuals? Just list everything you did to gather your information right here. And now we get to the absolute heart of the assessment, the risk assessment table itself. This is where you really get to show off your practical health and safety skills. So let's break down exactly how to fill this in, column by column. First things first, what exactly is a hazard? Well, in the simplest terms, it's anything that could hurt someone. It could be a wet floor, a noisy machine, even a stressful deadline. All of those are hazards. A perfect example is a simple trailing electrical cable. See, it's not hurting anyone right now, but it has the potential to. That's the key word. Now, NEBOSH really wants to see that you can identify a good variety of hazards. A classic mistake is to just find 10 different trip hazards. You've got to look across different categories. Think about physical things like noise, chemical hazards like cleaning fluids, maybe some ergonomic issues from a bad desk setup, and please don't forget psychosocial hazards like work-related stress. Everything you do should follow this classic 5-step process. The structure is really the foundation of any good risk assessment. You find the hazards, you figure out who's at risk, you evaluate those risks, you decide what to do, and then you record and review it. Your IG2 form is basically a record of you following these exact steps.
Okay, let's look at a real example. For that first column, you've got to be specific. Don't just write cables. You need to say something like slips and trips, trailing electrical cable. Then in the second column, you identify who could be harmed and how. Why is this so important? Well, because just saying they could get hurt is way too vague. The examiner wants to see that you've thought about the specific outcomes like fractures, sprains, or bruises. In the next column, you'll list any controls that are already in place. But here's the big question: are they enough? The key word NEBOSH uses is adequate. So let's say there's a wet floor sign. That's a control for sure, but is it adequate? Well, if the floor is always wet and people are still slipping, then no, it's not. An adequate control meets the law, follows industry guidance, and most importantly, it actually works. So let's break down how we evaluate risk. It isn't just about how bad something could be. It's actually a combination of two things: likelihood, which is just the chance of it happening, and severity, which is how bad it would be if it did happen. You have to consider both to really understand how serious a risk is. So how do you judge this in the real world? Well, to figure out likelihood, you can ask some practical questions. How many people walk past that cable every single day? Is it there all the time? And for severity, think about the worst predictable thing that could happen. A trip might just be a little stumble, but you could foreseeably break an arm.
That's the level of detail we need. When you recommend what to do next, you must use the hierarchy of controls. Think of it as a ranked list, from the most effective solution down to the least effective. You should always try to eliminate the hazard first. For our cable, could you use a cordless tool instead? That would eliminate it. If not, maybe an engineering control, like a rubber cable cover. Remember, PPE, things like hard hats and safety glasses, is always your last resort. Okay, let's move on to part 3 of the form. You've identified all your hazards, and you've recommended some great controls. Now you have to pick the most important ones and really justify why they absolutely have to be done. And you need to select just 3. Not 10, not 1, but the 3 highest priority actions from your entire risk assessment. These should be the big ones, the actions that are going to have the biggest positive impact on the most significant risks you found.
For each of your 3 chosen actions, you need a really detailed justification. And this section brilliantly shows what NEBOSH is looking for, a well-rounded argument. You must explain the moral reasons, because it's the right thing to protect people, the financial reasons, because it could prevent costly accidents, and the legal reasons. What specific law does this help the company comply with? You also need to explain why the control you've chosen is a good one, and how you decided on the timescale. We are almost there. Part 4 is all about closing the loop and showing you're thinking about the future. First, you just state when the risk assessment will be reviewed, usually in a year, or sooner if something big changes. Then, you need a plan to communicate your findings. Who needs to know? And how will you tell them? Maybe a toolbox talk for the workshop team? An email to management? A notice on the board? Being specific here shows the examiner you have a complete professional plan.
Before we wrap up, let's just go over a few final keys to success. Keep these things in mind as you're completing your assessment, and you will be on the absolute great track for a pass. So, here's the crucial stuff. Choose a good workplace, one with enough variety. Aim for at least 10 hazards across 5 different categories to really show your range. Make sure your recommendations are actually realistic for that specific workplace. Always try to benchmark your controls against legal standards, and above all, please, be specific and detailed throughout the whole thing. Vague answers just won't cut. And that's our walkthrough of the IG2 practical. You now have the structure and the strategy to tackle it with real confidence. The only thing left to do now is to start. So, think about your workplace right now. What's the very first hazard you're going to go and look for?